Hello, Devrek. How is everyone after this lunch? Good lunch, yes? I've got a bad news for you. I may ask you to stand up again. Uh, that's all right. Yeah, who is part of a software engineering team? Please stand up if you're part of a software engineering team. I would say almost all of you, more or less, yes? Now, second question. Well, no. Stay up. Hold on, this is not, you still have to work. I would like you to stay up if your team composition changed in the last 6 months. Maybe someone joined, maybe someone left, or maybe you had some kind of reshuffle. So stay up if your team composition changed, and stay and go down, sit if it did not. Interestingly, almost everyone is still up. Now I've got a third question for you. I would like you to stay up if there was a reshuffle and you change all your team composition on purpose. Part of the organization decided, no, we want to do things differently, and therefore all those teams are changing. So sit down if that was not the case, and stay up if you were part of a reshuffle. So now there is something very, very interesting. You can sit down, people. Thank you. So something very interesting, I don't know if you noticed. Almost all of you were part of a team change, the composition change. But almost none of you did that on purpose. None of you actually tried to adapt the structure of the team depending on your context. It's just people coming and leaving your team that make it change. Is that a good thing? I don't know, maybe. So more often than not, teams just keep doing what they've been doing, and they don't really think about the team structure. And I would say that's quite an important thing. Like we spend a lot of time thinking about, whether we should do monolith or microservices, whether we should be hosted on AWS or Azure or whatever. Do we actually take time to think about what shape is the right shape for our teams? And more often, we don't. So today, my goal is to get you to think a bit about that, and maybe, get back to the office and wonder what you should start changing to be a bit more conscious about team structure. So, who I am, I'm Julien. I work for a company called G-Research. We like to say we're in fintech, not an algo trading company, because that's a lot more sexy. But we do forecast stock markets, and we're really, really good at it. Some people claim that markets are efficient and that there's no money to be made. I can assure you that is not true. And especially, I lead one of the data engineering team in the business. So we're very, very, very data hungry, as you can imagine, because basically, if you have more data than everybody else, you can possibly build better model of those financial markets. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. So the agenda for the talk is the following. I'm going to give you a bit of context, the various phases we went through. Then I'm going to tell you a bit about how we work now, which I'm calling continuous reteaming. I'm going to talk about how we track progress in the company, well, in my team, and I will have some parting words. And just a tiny comment to the organizer. If I could get the screen there to work, that would be absolutely awesome, because otherwise I have to look back. Anyone for the screens? Yeah, that would be awesome if someone can do that. All right, so once upon a time. So how did it all started? So circa 2015, when I joined, our team structure was, well, not really working as a team, actually. So at some point, some kind of stakeholder would reach out to us and possibly reach out to the first person in the pipeline, which was maybe some kind of UI developer, and ask him, hey, I'd like that thing to be done for us. And that person was starting, doing the work, and then finally would need someone from the back end to do the work to expose maybe an endpoint for him. So he would send that work to the back end person, that would send that work to DBA, and really what that led to is, well, what we had is hyper-specialization of people and a lot of work in progress, because all those people are kind of depending on each other to do the work. that's quite a classical structure in many, many teams, this hyper-specialization. And that can be quite stressful because maybe that person in the middle is the bottleneck. Maybe implementing the backend takes more time. So he gets all the needs from the UI person and is like, oh, I'm super busy and nobody's helping me. And he might be himself blocked on the DBA, so it makes things even harder. So lots of work in progress. Huge bus factor. If any of those person goes on holiday or whatever, has an accident, the whole pipeline stop, and extremely long lead time and queuing between the people. So we did something we thought was sane, which is, hey, let's make proper team and let's make product team. So let's give a part of the system, a vertical slice, to a group of people and give them end-to-end ownership. And that's very, very classic. Now, what if the priorities change because you've got those two teams and now suddenly one team has the more high-value items, but it's only 3, and the other teams that used to have the high-value work is 5. So they're like, well, life is awesome for the people that don't have that much to do because, now they can do all the technical debt reduction in the world, which is, good for them. But sometimes that leads to quite interesting behavior. So I was talking to someone a few weeks ago. Apparently, they had a team for the login page. And I'm sure the login page was absolutely awesome. Like it was loading in 20 milliseconds. They had thought, what is exactly the right shade of blue to optimize the click rate, etc. While at the next time, there were like people that were like, had a lot of work and were like, help, help, help. But they had a team, 4 people for the login page. And the reason for that is that we're not really good at organizing those teams and recognizing that some teams have too much work and some don't. And it can be worse because sometimes the business can ask you to put all hands on deck. So all the people move to the high-value backlog items. Great. What if one of those person from the lower team was an engineering manager? What do you do with that person? Is not needed anymore? Do you ask him to go home? So that's super stressful. So how do you deal with this constant reorganization? So 2 problems, in my mind at least, very low adaptability to changing demand and unequal work distribution. So at that point, we changed to more like project teams. So we basically recognize that it's always going to change and we need to be extremely adaptable. So project teams, more often than not, you start with some kind of fixed scope. Business say, hey, we would like you to do that. And you just, assign people to those projects. And those projects, when the scope is achieved, they're going to stop, and you're going to move to something else. But in practice, there's also a few problems with that, which is it is super hard to compose teams. And the reason why it is super hard to compose teams is because it is hard to stop projects and transition. Because engineers, certainly I was like that, and I think everybody in my team are like that. They're like, oh no, there's always something else to do. We can make that thing slightly better. So it's super hard to recognize when you need to stop. And so what you do as an engineering manager when you're in that situation is that you try to slowly remove people from one project and move them to the other one. But then you're in this constant state of transition, and generally you realize when you do that this one person that you just asked to move to the other project was actually the one that was helping, making the glue between everyone and making the project progress. So it is a massive overhead on the manager because you have to really understand well all the people, what they want to do, and have a very good feeling. So what will be the impact on moving that person to the left or to the right. So that brings us to early 2018, so almost 18 months ago. And, well, my work was getting quite more complicated. So let you have a read at that for a second. Rings any bell? Have you felt like that at some point? Yeah, so my team of 15 engineers was still growing. We reached 20 later in the year, 10 plus stakeholders, so lots of competing demand, and a huge backlog of projects, like 30 plus man-years, so it's extremely difficult to track. And we've got a massive product scope, more than 100 pieces of software, we've got everything. We've got the legacy monolith, still not totally removed, lots of microservices in different languages because we pivoted in the last few years. We've got UIs, we've got kind of big data stack with Spark and etc. We have a lot of data, so we're using a lot of different database. And we even have infrastructure things such as Jupyter Notebook. Any one of those things could be something the business asks us to, put a lot of people to make it better, whatever better means. So we really have to be extremely flexible and extremely adaptable. And I was a bit sad. And the reason why I was a bit sad was mostly because I felt people were not taking ownership. But, is that a surprise? In the sense, if I am there to say, hey, you were working on this extremely great project, and I need you to move on this other extremely great project. Well, maybe the person, didn't really feel like that. Maybe, want to do something else. Maybe want to develop different skills. So people felt a bit like pawn on chessboard. Constantly move depending on what I thought was best. And the other thing is, how do you scale the team? Like, if you need to go to a lot more people, 30, 40, whatever, how do you do that? And we've experimented what I'm going to talk about with up to 50 people, actually. So I was sad for those two reasons. So at that point, it was time to take a step back and think a bit about what are you really, really trying to achieve with your system of work. And I came up with those 6 things, which is, hey, the first thing we are trying to do is have business impact. Sure, we are software engineers, we write code, but code is not the important part. What I used to say to my teams quite a lot is, I don't really care if you're shipping that piece of software to production. What I care is someone is using it and it makes a difference. So that's really the first thing. As software engineers, we're there to solve a problem and have impact. So first priority. Second priority, and I mentioned it, is adaptability to demand. So if the business wants us to start working on this extremely critical area, we should be able to do that. We should not say, hey, no, I have nobody, or just 3 people out of 15, therefore it will take 2 years. That is not acceptable, so we need to be able to switch very rapidly from one side to the other. The third thing is that I'm really, really keen to grow team members. Some people may want to develop new skills in new technologies, so how can we offer them some kind of system that let them, do that in some kind of efficient manner when they have, a big say? And especially that's important because when you start having big teams, it is super difficult to remember what everybody wants to do. So is there a way we could build a system where basically they get the control back on their side? Fourth thing, sharing learning, because if you find that something is working really, really great in one part of the organization, you really want to start use it also in other part of your team, your group. And the last two are a bit more personal, but I was really keen to kind of encourage self-organization. I don't want to have 15, 20 people just asking me constantly, hey, what should I do next? So that I can do other things. I scale myself, and I can be here talking to conferences or whatever else I think is important for the business. So that was the main thing. But the other thing is that I really, really believe there are key drivers for motivating people. And raise your hand if you've heard of that book, Drive, from Dan Pink. Maybe 10 people, so not a lot. I really, really, really recommend it. Basically, his hypothesis is that 3 things are key for motivating people. Autonomy. You work in a small group without a lot of external interference, so you can just, you have full control on what you're building. Mastery, so you develop skills, and the skills you care about, not just something that you have to because your boss is asking to. And purpose, which is you work on something that matters to you, whatever that thing is. So this is his hypothesis, that those 3 things are really, really key to motivate people. So at that time, I had quite a lot of inspiration to build a new system of work. So in 2012, I think, Valve released their handbook that they give to new employee. And there is something that's super exciting and super weird in some case in this handbook, is that so they give desk to their employees, so far so good, but those desks have wheels. Like, why would you put wheels on the desk? You know, desks, they're fixed, you know, and don't want that thing to move. Well, except that they say to their employee, take your desk and move and work on whatever you want in the company and just form teams. So they had this idea almost 7 years ago that people can work on whatever they wish. And they're doing that with more than 350 people. I thought I was entirely crazy when I read that at the time. And then you've got things such as Lego that has a big planning event where they get 150 people in the room for 1 or 2 days, and all those people collectively find out what needs to be done in the next 3 months. And then the third one is Dan North, which I was lucky to work with for almost a year, which also has quite a lot of ideas on that front, and I really recommend his blog and various talks. So that brings us to what on earth are we doing now, continuous reteaming. Do we have any managers in the room? Raise your hand. So we've got a few. So this is the part that's going to be a bit uncomfortable for you, because we manager, we like to think that we are there to empower people, etc. But in practice, we tend to like control, and that is the part when you are going to have to release all the control. So that's a leap of faith, and you'll find out why. So the system of work all start with a planning day, a bit like Lego, and very simple concept. You take all the demand, which is all the work that some people in the company or outside want you to get done, and you take all the supply side, which is all the people that are going to do the actual work. And you put all of those people in a room, you shake, and at the end of the day, something magical will happen. You'll have a new plan for the next 3 months or whatever time period you want to plan for. And as an engineering manager, you will have done almost none of the planning. You will just be there in the room, so very weird. So how does that work in practice? How do you imply this very simple concept? So first, let's go through quickly what the day look like. So we like to start with a breakfast, but that's optional. Why? Because actually we like to build a relationship with stakeholders and other team members. If you think that software engineering is all about writing code, you are going to have a few surprises in life, because no, actually understanding what people need and getting some empathy and understanding what they really expect is extremely important. So we spend quite a lot of time building relationship. The second thing we do is we review what has been done last quarter, and that's a great way to energize everyone and kind of recognize all the good things and all the successes that we had in the last 3 months. Then we start having what we call the demand side pitch, which is everybody, well, all the stakeholders kind of, expose what they want us to do in the next quarter. And that build alignments, because as I said, we're doing that with like 50 people. So out of those 50 people, there are some of them that I've never worked with almost. But I know what they're working on. So that's a lot easier for my own teams to take that into account and think on whatever could be useful for both sides. We've got lunch, and we use that again to build more relationship, and also start talking about what we've learned in the morning. Then we have what we call the Constraint presentation, because what we're going to ask the people in the room to do in the afternoon is fully self-organize and create the team that they think is right for achieving the work in the morning. So to do that, we need some constraint. It's not just a free-for-all, and I will give more detail in a few minutes. And then the afternoon is actually going to be all the iteration to find what is the right composition for all those teams. So we're going to engage all the relevant parties, and instead of having a few managers, a few PMs with the stakeholders in a room decided for everybody, we're going to do exactly the opposite. We're going to get all the people that are actually going to do the work to find what is the right solution. Finally, we will present to everybody there the plan for each of those teams, and we'll make sure that the plan is right by just testing against the constraint. And we'll have drinks, because believe me, at the end of that day, you're like, that was actually a lot of hard work. Right, so let's dig a bit into what we need to achieve that day. The very first thing, one of the most important thing, is that you need to know what are your top projects that you want to achieve next quarter. There's nothing like, I'm not going to give a lot of details on that. There's a lot of talks about how to manage your portfolio, but if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to present the work that you want done. So just get all your stakeholders together and establish what are the top N. Nothing exciting there. Then, as I said, you need all those people. And who are those people? So demand side, I mentioned those people before. They're going to be the stakeholders, your PMs, your POs, whatever terms or job title they have. Some of them might also be part of the supply side, like the people, the engineers are actually doing the work, may be stakeholders, because they may think, hey, to achieve all those things, we may need to build new framework or new infrastructure. So that could be also presenting on the demand side. Supply side is, as I said, everyone that is actually going to do the work. So your engineers, software engineers, system engineers, ops people, etc. Everybody you need to achieve that goal. You need a big room. That's very, very important, with a lot of walls, because when the demand side is going to pitch, you're going to have people taking notes and post-it and putting them somewhere. You want that place to be as far as possible from the office, just so that people kind of take it seriously and don't come and go. It's really important to get everyone together for the whole day. And you need to come up with the constraints. And actually, that is the part where the engineering managers have a lot of work to do. So the constraints are going to be the rule of the game to make sure that whatever teams we come up with in the afternoon, this is not entirely crazy and is going to actually work. So I'm going to give you an example, which is the one that we're using. So our first constraint is all works gets picked or deprioritized. So it's not because something is not interesting that it's not a priority for the business. So we need to make sure that everything gets picked. Or, and that's okay, the stakeholders together can decide that, yes, we need to deprioritize that thing because we can see that there is already too much work. We want team size to be between 3 and 6. Why? Because less than 3, we think this is not a team. This is basically just, if someone goes on holiday, you're down to 2. If someone is sick and someone is on holiday, then you're down to 1. So we want to make sure 3 is really the minimum for us. 6, we think that after 6, communication doesn't scale linearly, and then we start to get some loss. And the third thing is that if a team is a continuation from last quarter, we want some change, but not everything must change. So basically, someone should come into the team and someone should leave. And the reason for that is mostly cross-pollinations of ideas. So we want to make sure that if there is some good practice from a team, it's going to spread in other teams. And the way we force that is actually to get people to move. Why would you have a continuation from last quarter, you ask me? Well, we've decided to plan every 3 quarters, but that doesn't mean that projects will be fully done every 3 quarters. What we want to do is give us an option. So we're going to try to target something we think is achievable in 3 months. And then at the end of this quarter, we decide, do we want to keep investing in that area? Yes, great. If that's the case, we're going to have a continuation of a team. Or maybe not. Maybe the business wants us to do something else. So that's why we've got that. And then you can have other constraints, such as, for example, say 20% of the time spent by the team could be tech debt production, Kaizen work, whatever. This is up to you as an engineering manager to come up with those constraints. But my advice is just have the very minimum set of constraints that is required. If you come up with too many things, then people will start losing the power to self-organize. Right, so I'll give you a few detailed screenshots about some of those activities in the day. So previous quarter achievements, we spent roughly 5 minutes per team. So each of the sub-teams come up with a PowerPoint, and they've really, really focused on impact. How did you move the needle? Again, if your impact is I've deployed software, like, yeah, so what? How did you help someone achieve something in the company or outside? Is there still work in progress? Maybe. Do we need to think about it for next quarter, or do we just drop it and say, well, not too bad? And you really want to make it fun, because this is one of the very first things of the day. So actually, those are some real slides from some of our quarterly planning. So yeah, make it fun. Find a way to energize people. Do applause. Do celebrate, because you probably did actually quite a lot, and I think we don't recognize that enough. So it's good to have a system that kind of force you to think about all the good things that you did in the last quarter. The demand side pitch, we spend roughly 15 minutes by big topic. So again, you want to answer quite a few questions. What is the context, and why does it matter? Why does the business want us to work on that now? And it was not the case 3 months ago. Or basically, why is it a priority? And what is the expected business impact? So what are success criteria? Again, if you ask business people, they will probably not tell you, hey, success criteria is to deploy 22 times in production. No, they want some kind of effect. What is the effect? What does it look like? How would they know if we succeeded? And a very important thing is that you want to ask them, what does a great quarter look like? Which sounds very similar to what I just said, but actually it's a bit different, because now we are constraining to the next 3 months. And what I found in the last year or so is that the answer is actually very, very different, because all your stakeholders, they can have this great vision of the thing they want to build, but they do recognize that things take time. So if you ask them, what would be actually very, very good for you in 3 months, they give you a totally different answers. And this answer is probably, your MVP or whatever you want to call it, the core thing that you need to tackle. And you will take a lot of notes. You will have Q&A with your stakeholders. And again, that's something very interesting, because more often than not, when you do planning, it's a small group of people at the top of the company. Now, everybody has access to the stakeholder from day one and can ask the question that matters to them, not just the people that are actually going to do the work. Sometimes you do find that stakeholders actually ask questions between themselves, because they were not even aware that someone else was asking this project to be done. And they say, oh, well, actually, we could collaborate together. So good work. So in the afternoon, we have this self-selection and self-organization phase, where basically people will cluster work, and they will form what I call slam teams around the work. And we'll iterate until the constraint, for example, the one I've presented you before, are satisfied. So what is a slam team? SLAM stands for self-managed, lean, audacious, and multidisciplinary. And this is a term coming from this book, Brave New Work, which is a very recent book, which I really, really recommend, worth reading. But long story short, the idea is that we want to try to build a team that can have maximum impact. And to do that, we want to try to limit all the dependencies that that team has and make sure we've got all the people we need within the team to do the work. So it's really about removing as much as possible dependencies. And those teams, what we ask them to do in the afternoon is, come up with, fill basically a template. So we need a team name. We need to know who is part of the team. We need to know what is the mission. What are you targeting in the next 3 months? We want to know what are your stakeholders, who are you working for. We want to have an idea of your capacity. Like if someone is on holiday for 6 weeks, that's probably something that does matter. And we do SWAG, stands for Scientific Wild Ass Guess, which is basically just finger in the air estimate. We think that thing is whatever, 6 weeks, and that's almost the only estimation that we're doing. And we want 2 other things, which is risk and dependencies. What are the things that we either don't control, or the big dependencies that we have on infrastructure and team, things that could really, really slow us down. And generally, we can come up with those very, very quickly. And last but not least, we draft OKRs. So this is not a talk about OKRs, but another reference, another book you can read. OKRs stand for Objectives and Key Results, initially coming from Intel and later kind of made popular by Google. And the idea of OKRs is that you're going to come up with objectives that are moonshots. The idea is that you really want to stretch the team and for the team to think about something that would really, really make a big difference. And the hypothesis is that if you do that, you're going to get a lot more performance from the team than if you're trying to achieve something that is actually quite easy to do. And I think personally, based on experience, that work tend to fill the space. So if people don't have actually super ambitious things, they will just create work for themselves and start working on things that are actually quite secondary. Back to my idea of the login page. That does happen for real. You do have sometimes people of 5 people working on the login page. So that's the objective part, and the objective part get measured with key results, which is just, how are you going to measure that you're making progress toward these objectives? And you you measure this with a score from 0 to 1. 1 is, yes, we've achieved all of our key results, and 0, none of it. But the scale doesn't have to be linear, it's whatever you make of it. So that was the OKRs. So back to the afternoon, we get people to self-organize by just iterating. So people will iterate, start talking to each other, and start putting their name on some board somewhere next to work, and start filling the expected template. And one thing that is really important about the iteration that you can see here is that we create some sense of urgency by reducing the length of the iteration as time passes. That forces people to commit and say, no, actually, yes, I'm going to work on that and not just keep talking all afternoon because I can see that time is passing. When do we know how to stop? Quite easy. We've created that diagram, but we iterate. At the end of the first iterations, have we met all the constraints? Yes, great. No, start a new iterations, adapt teams. Is there too much work somewhere? And that's why we're using capacity and swags. If there is, well, maybe we need people to move around. If not, we can go to the next phase. What is the next phase? It is, have we addressed all stakeholder concerns? So for example, as a stakeholder, I could say, well, the work we need there is almost only backend, whatever, Spark something. And all the people are only UI developers. So that's great. Maybe they want to learn Spark, but if they really want to learn Spark, maybe we actually need at least someone in the team to be really good at it, to teach them and get some things done. So as a stakeholder, you can just raise those concerns. Now, the very, very important thing is that you just highlight the problems. You do nothing else. And trust me, and that's where I'm looking at the engineering managers in the room, they're like, oh, really? Trust me, people will solve those problems because fundamentally people want to do the right thing. They don't want to have be part of a team that is going to achieve nothing because we don't have the right skills. Similarly, you don't want to be the one expert and say, well, this team there, I could help them, but no, I don't care. I'm working all day with them, but I just want them to fail. So actually, that doesn't happen in practice. So you just want to highlight what the problem is, and believe me, people will just start moving around and kind of find solutions. And they will find solutions that are better than the one you can imagine. Because, as engineering manager, you think you know everything, but it's actually a very hard problem to optimize. You have all those constraints, and you need to come up with the one good solution. Believe me, the 50 people in the room can come up with a better solution than I could in the time in the afternoon. So that's why you want to just highlight the problem and let them fix it. So we end up the day, and there's quite a few things we've not achieved, and that's important to recognize that. The first one is that we recognize that we don't have a static plan. Things will change. Next day, someone will come and say, oh, new priorities is whatever. That's life. So we try to protect him as much as we can, or at least we try to challenge whether this is the new priority. But new work will come in. So one of the options that we use sometimes is we create some kind of business as usual team, which is a team that is just going to be the buffer for everybody else. So this is not magic. This is not going to suddenly change, new requirement coming and those kind of things. The second thing is that we need a delivery lead. I'll talk about that in a second. And the third thing is that we do need to finalize OKRs. OKRs is the way we're going to track progress for our group in the next 3 months. You do want to spend time getting them right. You do want to engage your stakeholders and making sure everybody is going in the right direction. This is really your North Star. So in the first couple of days of your 3 months, you should actually almost do only that, which is just make sure everybody is on the same page. So there's a few things I learned the hard way doing that for almost the last 18 months. The first thing is that stakeholders are like, one day off site, really? But I'm so busy. To which I say, if they really want you to commit significant resources to doing something, well, it is worth for them coming to make sure whatever we're going to build is actually the right thing. Otherwise, is that really that important for them if they can't come up for a day if you're going to commit, one people year of work for their thing. And the second thing we have is that sometimes, well, we have a 5 years roadmap, so they're like, oh, we already have a roadmap, no need to come, no need to prioritize work. Well, it's not because you've got, a vision for the next 5 years. They actually do what is the most important thing in the next 3 months. So that's why you want them. They really, really need to show up. The second thing, and in my mind that's actually the biggest problem, it's the command and control culture. As I said, as engineering manager, we like to believe that actually we're just here to empower people. That is not always true. And this command and culture is kind of, command and control culture is quite pervasive because actually if you spend enough time in that kind of environment, even you, as individual contributor, just expect your manager to take all those decisions for you. So it's really, really, really hard to actually take back the control. But is it a success? So that is a survey that I ran in my team, and the question was, do you want to keep doing the quarterly planning? And the answer was, yeah, almost everybody wants. There is just one guy that's like neutral, which I'm not going to have 100%, so I found that good. But there is still some downside to this approach, which is, hey, how do you deal with long-term ownership? It's a hard problem. I think that only works with software that fits in your head, which is kind of microservices. Because if you've got big monoliths, it's actually very hard to move people around just because you're going to block each other constantly. And as I said, this is a leap of faith. And we've been doing that work with 50 people, and I must admit that in other part of those 50 people, we don't have the same result as in my team, because this command and control culture is still there, and we do have those perform teams that kind of remove the benefit of this work. Very rapidly, I mentioned delivery lead. So we're creating a team. We still need someone to lead a bit, and that's basically what this role is. So that's just someone that keeps the team focused. This is not a tech person. This is a tech person, this is a software engineer, but this is not necessarily a tech lead. It can be if you want to. And I've attached what we ask those people to do, but they really focus on OKRs and giving the North Star for the team. And since we've got this empowerment culture, we actually let the team elect who they think is the right person. Now, the third thing we need to talk about very quickly is how on earth do you track progress when you've got this organization. So back to OKRs. As I said, we're using that to make sure that we go in the right direction. And what we do every Monday is have a big OKR update with all the delivery lead. And there is one specific thing that we do that is a bit different, which is we ask the delivery lead to rank their confidence that they're going to reach this specific objective that they set to themselves. And why we do that? Because that helps having very interesting conversation. Like, for example, someone would say, hey, yes, we're totally on track. We've done it all. Only 70% confidence that we're going to reach a KR. Well, I've just heard 99% if you tell me you're on track. Why only the 70? Oh, we've got a dependency on that other team. So this is really a conversation enabler, and it's really worth having. And we also talk about team health and general discussions. So yeah, we update those KR score and just have big conversation and make sure that we're all on the same page. So parting words. Generally, when I hear about people doing Agile, that looks a bit like that, which is you've got teams, and they apply Scrum, XP, whatever fancy framework you want. But the layer above is still pretty much command and control. You've got your manager, your PM that basically say, yes, I'm giving you those people, those resources. This is the work I want you to do next quarter. Is that really, really Agile? I'm not sure. Why are we not applying Agile at the next level? It's almost, Agile applied to you, not really Agile applied to all of us as an organization. And back to this interesting motivation, autonomy, mastery, purpose. I do think this is really, really important. And I do think that continuous reteaming there is a bit more aligned. to kind of enable those. So if you take self-organization, that's super important for autonomy, because now you can do whatever you want within your bubble. Self-selection help with mastery. Since you can choose what you work on, you can actually develop the skills you care about. And it also help in terms of purpose, because you can choose the project that matters most to you. And the third thing is business impact and OKRs. This is actually how you define the purpose, not in a big task list in a Word document that needs to be achieved, but as what is the business objective. So my kind of challenge to you is go back to your organization, think about that, start conversation, and start asking your managers or people around you, the system of work that we have, is it the right one? Should we make a change? Should we try some of those ideas? Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Do we have about time for one question? Do we have a question in the audience? Right here.
This is a really cool model. Do you see it scaling to a bigger team, maybe a 100 engineer team over several offices, several time zones?
Okay. So the question was, do I see that model scaling to 100 people across time zones? That's a very, very good question. The answer is, I don't know. And back to being agile. In my mind, agile is about experimenting. It's not about applying less, safe, Scrum, or XP. So some of that may not work, but maybe some of it may work, at 50 people, and maybe you can do it, 3 times, in parallel with, 3 times 50 people. Maybe that will work, maybe not. Having everybody in the room is really important for the way we structure that. But you can come up with your own recipe. Maybe you can do something similar in some kind of online tool. I don't know. Give it a try and let me know if it actually works.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Another round of applause, Julien.